23rd, 2024, wow. Things are moving by fast, and we're going to go through this meeting
Thank you for sharing.
expeditiously. I'd like to, first, in case people have not met the new town planner, Matthew James on the end here, and I'm going to ask Matt to stand up and say a few things. I'm not going to put you on the spot, really, but I already have. But what I'd like to do is go around and introduce people on the Comprehensive Plan Task Force, starting with this gentleman over here in the really bright hat that's taking my breath away.
Hi, Matt. I'm Peter Lieberworth.
And you may, okay, so, yeah.
I'm Mary Ann Nate.
If you don't know this person, you will know her very well.
We've met.
She has a bed someplace in the room.
It's a factotum.
I'm Amy Heibel, and we met the other night. It's nice to see you.
Phil Taylor, welcome.
I'm Dave Brown.
Bob Eaton.
Matt Gilly.
And we talked this afternoon in Apple Grove, and you know Kevin and.
I'm Mark Hireman. I don't know what I am
You're the
now.
not town planner.
Not done.
Semi-town.
Planning consultant, town planner. consultant.
Emeritus.
Emeritus,
Planner.
planner emeritus. I
You're the
like
town
that.
planner.
Okay, I know you really didn't plan to say anything, but I wonder if you could just say a few words about where you came from and sort of how you ended up here in this wonderful town of Harpswell.
Well, thanks for everybody introducing yourselves. I'm trying to keep track of all of the white beards and goatees. That's going to be a challenge. But Matt's easier to read.
It's going there, though.
Yeah.
We have the same name, too. He's got an
Yeah,
awesome name.
yeah.
That's really good.
Well, I'm Matt James. I'm the new town planner here, and I have a bit of a weird background that might not seem relevant by name at first, but I have quite a bit of experience with archaeology and anthropology, and I'm pursuing a degree in quaternary and climate studies. So all that led to me being an archaeologist, which didn't really work out super well. Not a well-paying job, so I figured I'd settle down and do something a little less dangerous and something that pays slightly better. So I got into code enforcement and planning in Bodenham, Maine, and now I've transitioned here to Harpswell to be a full-time planner.
Thanks.
Great, thank you very much.
Matt, you have an ongoing anthropological study right here.
Right.
Probably do your thesis on this.
Cultural anthropology.
You like
is
fossils?
really-
Fossils,
Here we are.
how tribes work.
No, wait. What Matt didn't tell you is what he really does the archaeological history of settlements. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've with a lot of as a lot of archaeologists do. I had a few different specialties: ceramics, forensics, so human bodies, and also settlements and development of ancient urban areas.
Great.
Fascinating, absolutely
Very
fascinating.
fascinating.
Well, again, welcome aboard, and I'm sure that I know you started to read the comprehensive plan. I think you said this afternoon you read it. You're on your second time.
Yeah.
My compliments to you, and we'll be certainly looking forward to your expertise as we go through the future. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on. I wanted to briefly talk about the meeting that I attended on the 16th of July, the non-resident taxpayers meeting. As was the case a year ago, there was a fair turnout. It wasn't quite probably as many, but there was a pretty good turnout.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what you would say, about close to 175?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And in general, a couple of things struck me. First of all, I think a lot of the people recognized that what we were doing here was important, and they expressed their appreciation for the effort that was being done. There were a couple of things I'd just like to bring out. I talked about one of the reasons, a couple of the reasons why we had delayed rolling this thing out from March 24 to March 25. Talked about the debate going on within the town about the best way to deal with affordable and attainable housing. I talked about the future land use plan, where we had proposed initially a number of districts, and that was not necessarily embraced by the town, and that we're working on a better way to do that. And I think the questions kind of went all over the map, but in general, I think it was a positive meeting, and I think most people appreciated the fact that we were going through this process. I don't know if you want to add anything, but.
No, it's a great meeting every year because people are happy.
Yeah.
They like their tax bills. That's what we usually want.
Yeah.
You know, wherever they come from,
Right.
their tax bills don't look like they do in Harpswell.
Exactly.
So,
Okay, moving on. We heard, actually at the last, or at least I heard for the first time at the last meeting, that the state hydrologist was going to visit Harpswell. And I'm going to ask Mary Ann to say a few words about that. But if you recall, one of the things that was brought up in the last several months was concern over the fact that we didn't have a current water study in the town. And so the fact that the state hydrologist is coming here to visit, to, I guess, make a presentation, ask questions, answer questions, and so on, is great, because that is going to partially compensate for the study that some people were looking for. So I don't know if you want to say any more about that, Mary Ann.
Yes, I do. Basically, you
Don't forget the microphone.
can't even reach it. Thank you. Going along with what you said is basically, you know, the Conservation Commission had started the Water Wise program, which talked about water usage in town and how to make the best use and keep the water on your property. Well, this gives us the opportunity, because people are asking for the science about the hydrology of wells. So we're going to have basically, this is going to be a kickoff to a couple of presentations. This first one will be what's behind the science? What's a hydrologist going to be able to tell us about finding out what it's like to live with a fractured bedrock aquifer? And also, we're hoping that she's going to be able to answer people's questions and satisfy their questions as to, we don't know where we're going with this from here, because we don't know, what's the old term, what we have already. And then based on what we have, what would be the next step? Where would you go from here to find the answer that everybody's looking for? So that has been set for September 11th. It's going to be at 6 o'clock here, right, as of now, right in this room. And it's going to be the first in a series, as I said. So we want to devote that meeting completely to her and let her answer the public's questions. And we're hoping that when the people walk, when folks walk out, that they will have a new understanding, and they probably will still have questions, but it's kind of just, let's start at the beginning and let her talk and let them go from there.
What's her name?
Jessica,
Is she a doctor? Is she a PhD?
PhD, she works at the Office of GIS, or GIS, hydrolog,
Dr. Jessica,
yeah, I don't have it right here with me, I'm sorry.
okay.
We're talking tomorrow. She's new with the Bureau, recently finished her PhD. She happens to be a colleague of a member of the Conservation Commission who was able to reach out directly. Kevin couldn't quite make it happen because
You've blown me off
he blew you off.
several times.
Right. So we kind of went in the back door.
getting the feeling.
You know, what can we say?
What can we say?
I mean, really,
It's
it's,
Totally
do
understandable.
your best.
You
It's
do
not
your
a first,
best.
by the way. Wasn't even a first that day.
So anyhow, we're going to start with that in September. Then we're looking to do another program in October, which will be, it's going to gear off our Water Witches, Waterwise program that we have. It's a presentation that looks at places in town where people live, how they're using water, how they're holding erosion control back, various areas. And then the thinking is, even from there, we can continue to have programs all the way through till next spring. Here again, just try to get the conversation going more with the people that are here, what they can do. And so by the time that the plan passes and your plan, our plan passes, people are going to be in a different state or a different stage
Great.
of thinking about
Great.
it.
And Mary Ann, the hope is that this will be a hybrid meeting. Is that correct?
That's the hope, yeah.
That the presentation will be here, people will be able to come here, but also be able to
That is
participate
the-
remotely?
The hope, but the town hasn't approved that yet.
Okay.
The administration is not doing those yet. But
You should have done it on a Monday or a Friday. When Jim's here.
I'll get Peter.
Okay, so stand
We'll
by
make it
for the
happen.
logistics, if you will, of the thing, but I'm glad that that's happening because, as you know, that came up as a question and concern when we were going back to the community here in the last few months about.
I know, I
hey, you
know.
why you guys going forward, we don't have the current water study. So, again, I'm glad that the timing of this is working out because at least hopefully some questions will be answered.
And you mentioned you were going to talk about water in this next issue of the Anchor. That's why I asked you to hold
Well, no,
off.
it's not going to be in this issue.
No, the next one.
Follow.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted you to hold back until
Yeah, right.
until we could firm this up.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have one administrative thing I'd like to do at this time. Kayla Matthews, who's our administrative support, as you probably know, has been holding down 2 jobs for most of the year. She works for the school and she part-times here. And as a result, we've sort of fallen behind on our minutes and so on, getting them approved and putting them into the website. But we have 3 minutes that were distributed in the last week or 10 days for the February 28th, March 13th, and March 27th. And I'd like to ask if there are any questions and have a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor? All right, I'll make sure that those are posted, and we're close to catching up once we do that. I don't want to put Mark on the spot, but
No, put me on the
I
spot.
do, okay, I will. Affordable Housing Working Group, Affordable Attainable Housing Working Group
Yep.
is wrapping up their work, and they're about ready to meet with the Select Board, I think. I have a workshop scheduled later this week.
I would not put it in the terms of wrapping up their work.
Oh.
But the Affordable Housing Working Group has been meeting, looked at the feedback and questions from the various inputs, looked at a number of questions and issues. They have prepared a revised draft of their report that will be discussed with the Select Board on Thursday night at 5 o'clock in a workshop. That report is, if you go to the Select Board agenda and click on the workshop item, you will get to the draft of the report. I'm not going to talk about the changes because that's going to be discussed and you can go there, see them, but there's substantial changes in their recommendations and proposals. And I think the intention of meeting with the select board is to talk about where they are now in the process and to see where the select board stands with respect to that. And I think the working group doesn't view this as the end of the process. I think, as you are aware, if you've been around town, the working group has been involved with Maine Housing and an organization called Nesterly to provide information to the community about a statewide home sharing program that's developed. The town has worked with HA to sort of coordinate outreach efforts. If you haven't seen it, there is an online article in the Anchor's online version that will be in the August issue. There are flyers that have been emailed and mailed and whatever to people about the effort. The town meeting a couple of months ago adopted amendments to the basic land use ordinance relative to accessory dwelling units. The working group, with the assistance of the town's Bowdoin intern, is working on developing a program to inform the public about ADUs and what you can now do and how you might be able to do it. The town will be looking through the Affordable Housing Working Group at some of the other initiatives that are in their recommendations. So this isn't we're going to give you the report and we're done. I think the working group, and Kevin's a part of it, is sort of committed to.
Barely.
What do you mean barely?
God. I can't keep up with their emails.
Well, and I would say they are a very committed group.
They are.
They're workers. And poor Ben, the intern, Courtney drug him around town for 5 or 6 hours last week in the heat to hand out flyers and get stores and churches and whatever to distribute them to people. A plug, if you're not aware, home sharing is really renting your spare bedroom through a systematic process where you can list your availability, your willingness to rent a bedroom through Nesterly, which is an organization that has been doing this in other locations, and match you with somebody who's looking to rent. It's not short-term rentals. It's for a minimum of a month. The original agreement can be up to a year. The system involves background checks and formal agreements and oversight by Nesterly, a little social engineering where they look at the host who's renting the unit and the person interested in renting it to make sure that they seem to be compatible in terms of what they are. They've had a lot of success in other areas that they've done this, and this is their first venture as a project that's sponsored by Maine Housing. It was authorized by the legislature a year ago. I say this because the goal of the outreach program is not that Amy has a bedroom to rent, but she might have a neighbor who might be, you do? All right, Amy might have a bedroom to rent.
My daughter might have a problem with that, but when she comes to visit, but, you know. what-
Well, that's,
She
but,
can
but,
sleep in the garage.
but the goal is not that you have a bedroom to rent, but you might have a neighbor, somebody at your church, relative that this might be inappropriate for. It's for cash. It's a rent arrangement with a structured lease, and Nesterly collects the rent automatically through automatic debit, gives it to the person renting it. And so the goal of this outreach program, for the town's involvement and HA's involvement, is to make people aware. And if there are people, Nesterly estimates that there are 50,000 empty bedrooms in Maine that could potentially be rented to. And the interesting thing, if you go to the young man who wrote the article in the Anchor, who happens to be an intern, and the issue for the Anchor was, where is this person going to live for the summer?
Yep.
Home sharing is the perfect example of how that need can be met.
Question mark. ADUs are not in the shoreland zone district,
These are not ADUs.
but you could still take advantage of this service if you are in the shoreland zone.
Any home in Harpswell
Okay. perfect.
can take part of this. It's not related to any of the regulatory provisions. It's,
Good.
you know, in some ways, it is a new name with technology to an old age system where Ma said to Pa, you know, we got that empty bedroom upstairs and taxes are going to be due and maybe we could find somebody to rent it to. It has been going on for generations and this is a way to do it. I say that because this is an opportunity that maybe there are some people in Harpswell, particularly older people who want to stay in their home, are lonely. One of the comments I've made is, I can't imagine being 80 years old and living alone in a 3 or 4 bedroom house in January when everything's dark and the wind is blowing. This is designed to be also companionship, to provide that social intergenerational relationship and deal with the social aspects of living alone or an older couple. Sorry,
No, that's good.
No, that's a really good point. We have a friend who had an accident in their home and was on the floor for 10 hours before anybody found them.
Yep.
So if there had been someone living there, might.
And the town is not endorsing this. HA actually is, as a result of talking to the people who run Nesterly. But this potentially is a real opportunity for people in the community to deal with both that economics. You know, I think the number that's been talked about is $700, $800, $900 a month potentially is the rent on a bedroom with kitchen privileges in Harpswell.
Well, I mean, I think that's really interesting because, you know, as everybody in this room knows, one of the issues that folks had with the plan that was rolled out initially was concern over building smaller houses on smaller lots, potentially increasing the density of houses in certain areas and so on. And so when you look at the options that you have, this kind of fits into an option.
This was one of the primary recommendations of the previous version of
I never saw Nesterly in the,
well, Nesterly, this is sort of the stars aligning.
okay.
The plan, the earlier draft of the plan said that the town should work to create a home sharing program and investigate ways to do that. Out of the blue drops this state program that is just in the process of being created, where the legislature said we should do a statewide pilot home sharing program. We'll provide money to Maine Housing to get it started. Maine Housing went out with a request for proposals and selected Nesterly based on their experience in already doing this.
So, go ahead, Peter.
Does Nesterly share its data with either HA or the town or the state?
We don't know the answer to that, but we're trying to find out the answer to that. The listings of units that are being offered to rent are on a publicly accessible website. Much like if you wanted to look at what Airbnb or some of the other services have, or, you know, the I can never remember what used to be called the multiple listing service is now called. You know, it's the same sort of thing as you can go in and search by geography and say, I'm interested in this area and here's what's available.
Terminology question. At one point, there was a big effort to substitute attainable for affordable. Have we abandoned that?
No.
So is the Affordable Housing Working Group now the Attainable Housing Working Group or not?
The answer to that question is, for better or for worse, it's still the Affordable Housing Working Group, because that's what the Board of Selectmen created and sent them with a mission to come back to them with recommendations for what the town should do. The report is still cast in the term using attainable, and the reason for that is the sense of the working group that many of the income limits of state and federal affordable housing programs and rent limits are too low to work in Harpswell. And so the idea of attainable is that it could be affordable, but it could also be housing that would meet the needs of what is increasingly been called the missing middle. The Council of Governments did a preliminary market assessment back here a year ago or so, and they're refining that. What they said is, here's the need for affordable housing, here's the need for higher income housing, here's the need for housing in the middle, people who have too high an income to qualify for the federal and state affordable housing projects, but can't buy a starter home, can't rent a decent apartment within those limits. And what they said is that the majority of the housing need in the mid-coast was in that, what has now been labeled the missing middle. There's lots of stuff for subsidizing lower income. There's lots of people who build you $1 million houses, but there is a serious need for people in that, sort of lower middle income group.
So the tension between those terms has not been resolved.
No. You see,
Well, okay.
Okay, that's great, because from our standpoint, when we look at the feedback that we got about cluster homes and so on and so forth, the future land use plan that we put forward, where we broke the town up into districts, there was a lot of comment about that. At least, from my perspective, you have options here, Nesterly, ADU, the conversion of larger homes into duplexes.
Correct.
To keep it within the same footprint. I mean, we have options, in other words, to tackle the problem of affordable/attainable housing, other than just say, we're gonna wait for a developer to come in and build a whole bunch of cluster homes in a certain area. So I wanna make that point because in the not-too-distant future, we're gonna have to take the proposal that we had with districts, and I think we talked about this a little bit the last time, and make it sort of a more generalized approach. Because when you really look at what we have in Harpswell, aside from the minimum lot sizes that we're talking about, 1,000 for single-family home, and what is it, for a
I'm going to say again?
1,000 and 80,000.
40,000?
40,000 for a single
family
family.
home, 80,000 for a.
No, actually, it's 40,000 for any dwelling unit. It's 40,000 for a one-bedroom unit.
Right.
It's 40,000 for a six-bedroom
In the
unit.
interior zone,
In
outside of a subdivision.
anywhere.
Anywhere.
It's 80,000 if it's in a subdivision, it's 80,000 square feet for any dwelling unit, not just for a single-family home.
But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that when we look at our ordinances and what we're talking about here and some of these new things, we may have enough flexibility to accommodate some of the goals with respect to housing that people have been concerned about, without getting into specifying areas, districts, if you will, in the town, which created a lot of consternation in a lot of people.
And understand that the Affordable Housing Committee recommendations didn't divide anything into districts. That was all in the future land use plan.
Right.
The Affordable Housing recommendations simply said, here's a suite of tools.
Yeah.
And in the future land use plan, they got divided up and somewhere and whatever.
I just want to say, I mean, this is all really good. We've been here for 35 minutes, and we've spent most of the time talking about affordable housing. This plan has to do with transportation, environmental protection, wildlife habitat. It has to do with education. It has to do with a whole bunch of other issues, and we are not talking about them. Can we do that? Because I don't want to sit here for another 3 hours.
No, we're not gonna sit here for 3 hours, that's guaranteed. But I think the reason we kind of vectored into this was because, in my opinion, my humble opinion, the biggest sticking points that we've had with the plan have involved affordable, attainable housing and how that translates to the future land use plan. I see much less contention with respect to transportation, with respect to all the other public facilities, libraries, education, and so on and so forth, than I do with the areas that we just talked about. So we kind of gravitate to that because those have kind of been big sticking points that I've heard. I haven't heard people talk, for example, in the last 6 months about, I have a hell of a lot of concern about our transportation network in the town. Or I have a hell of a lot of concern about the recycling center. Or I have a heck of a lot of concern about fire and rescue, or the libraries, and so on and so forth. And by the way, all of those things you're gonna see in the next edition of the Anchor and how we've summarized that in the plan. So even though we haven't necessarily talked about those things in great detail, I felt like, or I feel that those are much less controversial and much more straightforward than some of the things we've just talked about. That's just my opinion.
Al, I agree with you. I think in fact, we have talked about a lot of those things over the course of our couple of years together. And I do think that the biggest sticking point we've bumped into is related to the cost of housing. So I think if we can solve that, that's however we solve it.
Plays right
I think
into
that's our biggest thing.
future land use and all other things. I mean,
That's my
I
opinion.
understand what you're coming from, but,
Well,
Sir.
I think the issue is that we need to sharpen our discussion towards some goals of actually getting a report out that we're all happy with. I think that, I was trying to figure it out, my guess is the way we're going now, I'm picking up on Amy's criticism of our process, so this is just amplifying a little, but I don't think the issue is whether we're wasting time on the housing. Housing is, you're absolutely right, the big issue. We identified in the draft, it says there are 3 issues that have been lifted up in all our public meetings: housing, working waterfront, and environment. So that's fair enough, and it's fair to spend time on it. I would just like to see us sharpen the discussion a little, rather than just sort of a generalized sort of information sharing in terms of where are we going with this. And the other part is, I think at some point in October, we're going to be presented with the plan, says do we approve it? And we have never had, in fact, even a 15 or a half-hour discussion of transportation. And although transportation is not a big issue, I think we should set aside some time and say, okay, prepare yourselves, next meeting, we're going to do transportation and we're going to do public services or whatever it's called. And we should come prepared and have that, and then tick it off and say, have we got issues? Where are the issues? Where we don't have issues? If we're good with it, tick it off. That now is off the table.
Okay.
It goes into the hopper, it's approved, rather than being confronted with all of them all at once and we've never had a chance.
Okay.
I would hope we have a focused discussion, limited every meeting on 1 or 2 of the secondary, tertiary issues.
okay, I will do
And then
that.
sharpen the discussion
I
on
will
housing.
I will do that, and it's probably gonna be more than 1 or 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will do that and put it out an agenda that reflects that kind of thinking, so we can satisfy both ends of the spectrum.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I just want to make a point that I think part of the reason that we haven't heard from about other issues is because this affordable housing issue has dominated the conversation. And so it's really, we only have so much time,
Yeah.
and it's prevented us from talking other things. When I sat on the select board, transportation was an issue. We met with the sheriff, we met with state people about traffic in Cundy's Harbor and how it was becoming more and more difficult for pedestrians and unsafe for pedestrians to walk there. Same thing at the end of Potts Point, same thing on Orrs Bailey. So transportation, pedestrian safety is an issue for people. And we're not hearing it because we're so focused on the light over here that everything else that's going on over here is invisible to us. And a comprehensive plan is comprehensive.
Okay, so let me open it up. What issues do you want to see in the next? I'll open it up to you folks. Do you want to talk transportation? Do you want to?
Well, what Amy was talking about, we're actually going to discuss it Thursday night of having a public session to dealing with what you were just talking about again. With the sheriff's department and all the stakeholders in town, the Cundy's Harbor people, the Burnett people, Basin Point, they've been a little quiet lately, but, even up by the Mitchell Field, the people live along there, the people stream through there, and the sheriffs, actually, they've been out, but people, walking Basin Point, they think everybody's going 100 miles an hour, and he says they're not. But the perception is when you're walking a road and a car coming, it sounds like they're going too fast, but.
Yes, it sounds like it, and what we heard was there's more traffic. So if you had one car go by every 10 minutes at 30
yeah.
miles an hour, it's different than having 20 cars go by in a minute, every, 30
Oh,
miles.
yeah.
Well,
I think we're sliding into another information sharing discussion, and I
Right.
don't know where it's
Oh,
going.
I would just answer the question about
Yeah.
transportation, that
But-
the select board's gonna be handling it in the next few weeks, and we can come back with what we came up with.
In fairness, Amy, if we just said, let's open up to natural resources, we could spend 3 months on natural resources if we chose to. It's a big issue, there's a lot to be said. I think we have to acknowledge that the public meetings, by our own conclusion, picked up 3 issues. I don't think they've crowded out other issues. I think it's just that the 3 issues that came up have fairly been stated, and we can't go back and revisit that. I mean, if you're making the discussion that we should elevate transportation to the level of discussion of housing, I think we're past that. I think we know that housing is more important than transportation. We could spend a lot of time on transportation, there's no question, but we got to prioritize. And because once you do that, Amy, we could open up the whole damn thing. It's a can of worms.
I'm not suggesting that, and I'm not suggesting that. I am asking that it just be covered and that we have intelligent discussion around it. That's all I'm asking.
Sure.
And that hasn't really happened.
Okay, so let me again pose the question.
Go ahead.
I'm hoping to get, let's name 3 or 4 items that we want to focus on for the next meeting. Now, obviously, if you have 3 or 4 items, you're not going to be spending an hour on each item. But in the interest of at least addressing them, can we have 3 or 4 items, and then we can look at a discussion to see if what we have in the plan right now fits the bill. And if it doesn't, then raise the red flag and we'll focus on it.
Good, well put.
Okay, so, coming up in the next anchor, there'll be a discussion of transportation, public facilities, fire and rescue, libraries, and recreation. I think there are
Could we
5.
focus at the topic headings in the plan so we know what to review exactly?
Okay.
Like I think frankly, you could almost randomly pick them, although Amy's raised transportation, if that is a secondary hot issue, we should take it first.
Well,
'cause
it
maybe
sounds like
there's
it's
more.
going to be discussed here in the near future, right?
It is.
Okay, so let's put transportation for the next one.
Followed by fiscal capacity, it just happens to, I would just like to take chapters in the report so we can tick them off as, that's in the done pile. And we're
All
now
right.
back, and now we're back to land use.
In the next anchor, what we've covered, what I've put in to cover is public facilities, and that includes things like the fire and rescue, waste management, law enforcement, libraries, educational services, and transportation. Those are the areas that are going to be summarized in the next anchor. If you want to see any of those items highlighted, we can certainly carve out 3 or 4 of them and focus on it for the next meeting. And the first, I'm trying to remember, my brain's getting a little bit fuzzy here, but the first anchor item in July talked about, one second, I got it here. I think we talked about natural resources, working waterfront. I'll have to refresh my memory on that, but there were 3 or 4 items that we talked about in the July issue. And we can revisit those if you want in a meeting that we have in the next month or so. If you want to do that, we can tick off and go through the entire report. There are, I think, 12 or 13 different topics that the comprehensive plan covers. So we're talking about, if we want to do it in a timely fashion, we're going to have to take up at least 3 or 4 in in each meeting.
I have a kind of a query in my mind. We have transportation, for example, and we have government, and we have a set of statements of what we know and what generally we should be thinking about. I guess my question is, where do we go from there with that? Are we looking to pull this information in to have something pertinent to say about land use? I'm questioning Amy, because I'm not sure.
I really don't know either. I mean, what I recall is in our public meetings, the numbers for the traffic counts were questioned as being up to date. I don't know if they have been updated or whether they're, I just don't know.
The transportation, the way we covered transportation, we didn't talk about traffic counts. Because one of the reasons is, I think the last time that was brought up, and that was months ago, was the data that Viewshed got. Their opinion was that the traffic, in terms of traffic counts, was not significantly different than it had been in the past, as I recall.
If I was going to talk about transportation, I would talk about it in 2 or 3 different ways. One would be pedestrian transportation. So how easy is it, how safe is it for those who live in the little village areas to actually walk and access certain things? Is it safe? I would also look at elderly transportation. Do we have, what happens if you get stuck in your home and you can't get to the grocery store because you've lost your driver's license? That's a big issue in transportation, and it's not going to go away. I talk about bicycle transportation, other alternative forms from the automobile. And I would also talk about Harpswell developing, and you know this from being on the planning board, what happens with our zoning is that we're seeing curb cuts at intersections that are not necessarily safe. And we're going to see increasing development where curb cuts happen at intersections, like at Mountain Road and on either end of Mountain Road. And should we be taking a look at what we do with those? Those are things I would be thinking about for transportation.
Well, the other part of
that are not
transportation.
being discussed.
Other part of transportation is roads impacted by sea level rise and so on and so forth.
Exactly, yes.
I mean, yeah, it's not that it's not important, it's that,
Those are just off the top of my head. I'm not.
in terms of safety of the roads. Go ahead.
Procedurally, I think going through sort of the section by section makes sense. I think there are 2 parts to it, though, and Amy kind of touched on both of them. One, I think the inventory sections are now essentially 2 years, or the data is 3 or 4 years old. I think it would be good, once you decide what the topical areas are, to have 2 or 3 people, maybe, and I'm going to say, maybe work with Matt to go through the inventory sections. See, we're getting, throwing them in. And say, okay, does this cover everything? Are there things in here that need to be updated so we don't get the kind of comments that Amy just said of, well, this is outdated, and that's the first way of discrediting something. So I think setting up a simple process to review the inventory sections. Second is to set up a process for reviewing the policy sections that says, 1, have we covered everything that needs to be covered? And maybe the answer, Amy's answer in terms of transportation is no, we haven't. We need to consider these things. And are the policies that are in there reflect what we want? I think you need to do that. I think you could do it pretty expeditiously if you had a bunch of little groups that would say, yeah, we'll take the natural resources section and we'll go through it. I can name the people who would be on it right here. Let's see, is Mary Ann one name or two?
Possibility.
Huh?
Possibility.
But to do that, because that's a key piece that needs to be there and do it. Second, I would argue for giving you all a homework assignment that says, we're going to talk about transportation at the next meeting. Look at the section, tell us, answer 3 questions about it. Are there things in here that aren't covered that should be? Are there things in here that we don't need? And what do we agree with or disagree with? And bring that to the meeting and have a go. And my bet is that you probably could get through most of the sections in a 20-minute or half an hour discussion if everybody does their homework and comes prepared.
All right, does that sound good to everybody?
It's a plan.
All right.
There
Huh?
are
It's a plan.
13, I just looked at, there are 13 sections.
13.
The big 3 leaves 10. And if we wanted, in this expedited way that Mark was referring to, which I support, we probably ought to do at least 2 per meeting of the 10 secondary issues, so,
I would say 3.
okay, 3. And then keep ourselves to 15 minutes per issue or something, and then decide if an issue blows up in our face, and it could be transportation, then we'll just have to step back and say, okay, we got it. But I think we have a draft here. This is not like we're reinventing the wheel. We have a draft that's been worked on. We should not pretend that nothing has happened here, or that we have nothing. And I think
Or that we can
our
resolve.
approach is, we're working on a draft that we've basically been happy with. And now we need to go over and one last review process. If one blows up, and Amy's right about transportation, we'll have to deal with that. But fundamentally, we're just, it's now in the final phase. of
Okay,
approval.
so now, pick the 3 topics for the next meeting.
Yep,
Get 2 or 3 inventory reviewers that'll get together
Well, we have,
with the town planner.
okay, we have, in the not too distant future, we're going to have the hydrologist here, so I think one of the topics ought to be the water resource, how is it worded in there, water?
It's just in 2 places, natural resources and it's in 2 places.
Water,
Yeah.
water quality or something
Yeah.
like that. Let's do natural resources, let's do transportation. As
Don't
two-
pick all the big ones for the same meeting.
No.
What meeting are we talking about?
how about
Next meeting.
economy?
When is it?
That's a
Economy is an easy one.
piece of
Pick a
cake.
couple of small ones and big ones and
Okay,
match
natural
them.
resources, which includes water, transportation, and economy for the next meeting, which is the next comprehensive plan meeting, 2 weeks from tonight.
Right.
Al, I would just point out that if we meet every other week, there's 2 meetings in August, 2 meetings in September, and probably 3 in October. So that's 7 meetings to get us to the end of October.
Okay.
Al, I'd prefer not to do the next meeting for natural resources.
I'm sorry,
getting
Mary
ready
Ann,
for-
could you?
All right.
The
okay,
next meeting's in 2 weeks. And
Okay,
it's right before the program that we're trying to get ready. And get,
all right.
so I really.
Not
I have
natural resources.
Family
then-
here too,
Then
Public facilities,
sure.
piece of cake.
public facilities.
Let's do some light work first, just to feel good.
Yep.
Public facilities and the economy.
What are the 3 now? I wrote down 3. and-
Transportation, public facilities, and the economy. Oh, okay.
And curiously, I think transportation has a lot of issues. I'd love to work with Amy on that one.
You know,
So I guess the question, just devil's advocate, so the question, let's say, we say, all right, there's more traffic in Harpswell now than it was 15 years ago. Then what? In terms of the comprehensive plan, how does that translate into an action or a goal?
It doesn't.
Whoa, no, I
Tear down the
disagree.
stop sign at Cunny's Harbor
You're gonna
Road.
widen the road, which has problems, you're gonna put, the same thing with safety. Amy talked about safety
Use
on
my
our
truck.
roads. We don't have bike paths.
$1 million a mile, the bike path. Already looked into
Yeah.
it.
Now.
That's
if
what
you-
it was.
If you talk about in the village areas, yeah. I really can't speak to that, but if we're talking about safety along our 123, 24, and Mountain Road and so on and so forth, the fact that we say, well, gee, we don't have any, safety could be an issue on these roads, how does that translate into a future action or policy?
It can translate, I mean, if you don't talk about it, it's not going to translate into anything. This is part of the discussion we should have been having 2 years ago when, and I'm sorry.
Okay,
I
we're
think
here now,
It
so.
should, well, now is too late, I have to say, because what we should be talking about this with is people who live in the neighborhoods and asking for their input. So you live at the end of Potts Point. What's your input on this? But we're way by that now. So now we're talking about making decisions for them, and we don't know. We're just sitting around here at a table. And so I think we're past that point. I think we're done with it. But to say that we can't do anything is, I think that's defeatist. And I think it's ultimately not really going to serve, it's not, we could ask for further research. We could ask for polling. We could ask for neighborhood meetings to talk about the issue. We could ask for the state to come in and reevaluate whether or not the speed limits are right. There's many things that we can do. But if we just say, well, there's nothing we can do about it, so why should we bother looking at it? You know, I have other things to do, really and truly, I do. I got other stuff to do.
So Al, let me, if I could jump in. First of all, I think we did talk about transportation. We talked about every single section that's in the plan, and we talked about what should be in it. Does it mean it shouldn't be updated or couldn't be reviewed? Absolutely, it could be. The other thing I think about the comprehensive plan is it does not proscribe what the select board or the town or any of its committees decide to do at any upcoming town meeting over the next 10 years, or the duration of the comprehensive plan. But comprehensive plan does have some rules, some opportunities around the future land use plan, which, if there's something in that in the comprehensive plan, then it gives you some more options than if it doesn't, but that's okay. So I think the land use plan and the related things to housing are the sticking point. We talked over the last year to a bunch of people in town, and they didn't really raise transportation or safety too much. Now, maybe there is, but if we don't put it to the nth degree in the comprehensive plan, that doesn't stop us from addressing it in the next year, the year after that, whenever we want. I mean, the comprehensive plan is an input to ongoing planning. It's not the end of the road for planning for 10 years.
I don't think it's our job to solve a lot of these problems. I think it is our job to identify where we'd like to see the town go over the next 10 years, and to identify some of the things that need attention.
Right.
So, one of the Viewshed talked about strategies and goals and et cetera. I don't think it's reasonable for us to solve all these problems, but we can say, let's pay attention to this.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the plan, there are over 140 different strategies, if you will. And my take on that was always, well, this one might not work, but that one might. So it sort of serves as a menu. And anytime you can make progress on any one of those particular recommendations and strategies, you're sort of moving in the right direction. You're not solving the problem completely, but you're chipping
We
away.
set the stage for future committees to get more detailed.
Right.
While the land use plan, we weren't gonna set all the
But
regulations.
here's the reality here. I'm willing to go in whatever direction you folks want, but we want to get this thing wrapped up and up before the town next March, okay? not negotiable. We've missed one, we're gonna make the other one. We need to, there are certain parts of this plan that need to be worked on, revised, and so on. And there's another question that we have to answer is, we can't necessarily do all this administratively by ourselves here in Harpswell. We're gonna need some view shed to at least, they have the master plan, if you will. They have the capability to make a new map if we want to change the map. They have so on and so forth. So I think at some point we have to look at how do we re-engage them for specific things that we want done. And then the other thing is that we need to trot this out at least once before the town, at a public hearing or something before the March deadline. So I'm looking at this, and, you know, that's part of this agenda that I put together. I would like to complete any edits that we have by, like, November. And then the question is, someone suggested that do we put it to the state for the state review? I don't know how long that takes, I don't even know how that would happen. Do we just mail it up to the state and say, take a look at this?
No, there's a process where you fill out
That's
a
right. All right.
evaluation of how you addressed all the different things in the state rules and
All right.
on what pages those are and.
People want that, do you think that was something
Wait.
we ought to do? Go ahead.
Let me go back.
Okay,
I think we were on a path,
yeah.
and the fundamental question is, does this group think there's a need to go back through and look at the topics other than land use and housing? Because I think that's a fundamental fork in the road. If the answer is no, we're okay with there, or there are one or two other areas that we should go back and look at, then I think that's a key decision that you need to make. If the answer is no, then you don't have to worry about a process. If the answer is yes, we should go back and look at transportation and public facilities and natural resources, then you need to set up a process tonight to do that.
I have my own opinion. I'm anxious to hear what everybody else wants.
I'm thinking, actually, and I'm not sure what each of these small little subtopics even are, but normally at the end, we kept the plan, and there's usually a direction to have a comprehensive plan committee to work on the things that are suggested to be done in the plan.
You're talking about an implementation.
Implementation. So let's look at, I'm going to go back to the last plan because I remember it. The last plan called for an open space plan to be developed in town. It was tasked for the Conservation Commission to look in and figure out how to do it. And we worked for 3 or 4 years on that. My sense is we would be doing this the same on transportation, for example. We're going to have some things in the plan that say, we suggest that a study be done or something be done going forward. We're not going to solve the problems. We're going to highlight the problems as were mentioned. And then we're going to push it down to the next group to work on.
Process.
As part of the
Or
process.
groups.
Or groups. And they have a certain amount of momentum for a number of years, actually. You know, I'm going from history on the last one. So,
Okay, getting back to the basic question of, that said, I think that's good kind of context, if you will. We know the 100-pound elephant in the tent has always been affordable, attainable housing, and how that translates into the future land use plan. Aside from those topics, which we've spent a lot of time on, are there any other topics that require additional focus.
Maybe we should do just to see.
Before we, I mean, we talked about transportation, or should we just say, okay, we have 8 or 10 more topics, let's just go through 8 or 10 topics and just spend.
Well, to me, I don't know what's so complicated about this. I think Mark is, we have an editing problem. We have a procedural problem as a group on how do we feel confident in November, if that's the deadline, that's a good one, that this document that we approve, we really understand and have approved it. It strikes me that if we don't do anything, and we spend our next couple months on land use and working waterfront, which I haven't even talked about, and so on, that then in November, the chair is going to say, okay, here's the plan, this is just the policy part, and here are the inventories, do we approve them? And for most of us, we haven't even looked at the transportation one or the economy one in 2 years, and we're going to say, oh, yeah, sure, we do. What choice do we have? I'm just suggesting that we should, section by section, in a disciplined and very precise way, at each of our next meetings, pick out several sections. And it's not a question of, there they are. It's easy. Pick out 3. With, by the way, and Mark points out, with the inventories, which makes it a little more complicated, but the inventories and the policy section, look at them, have a discussion. Do we agree with it? We feel good about the economy section? Great. Put that economy section in a bag. It's done. Do we still have outstanding issues on transportation? Maybe this is where we need to call Viewshed back in to update the inventory, and maybe we need some policy issues.
Yeah.
We just make a decision, but we have to methodically go through this document and approve it. That's simple to me.
Bob, looking in the wrong direction, look back.
Well, what I was going to say, and I don't want to throw Matt under the bus here too far, but
Yeah.
if somebody looks at the inventories and simply says, these are things that need to be updated, whatever, if somebody creates the punch list that says, here are the 8 things in the inventories that need to be reviewed or updated, or we have questions about, I think at this point, you can probably get most of that done in-house. He's nodding yes.
Okay?
And so I think that process, I think that's what people need to do. Not find the answer, say, here's are the things that need to be updated. Here are the policy areas that we think there are questions about that we need to address. That's, the story is if you don't ask the right question, you don't probably get the right answer. And
All right.
And I think our focus should be on part 1. If we find things in part 1 that lead us to question the inventories, then we go there. But to say we're going to do close reading of everything doesn't make sense to me at this point.
Probably makes sense.
All right.
We could jettison the inventories, frankly.
Matt, I would ask you if you can, and I will certainly help you with the inventory chapters. And I've been looking at those things for a while. I think they're pretty good by and large, but there are certain things that need updated, and I've thought about that a little bit, so I can jump in there. With respect to the front part 1, let me hear a recommendation as to which topics you want to delve into in a systematic way, starting with the next meeting. Transportation, obviously, is,
Why don't we just take it chapter by chapter? I mean, I think that.
well, because Mary Ann has said that there's a lot on her plate right now, and some of those early chapters deal with
Well, we can skip a
marine
chapter.
resources, freshwater resources, and things like that.
We take it chapter by chapter, except for natural resources.
Okay, freshwater
Yeah,
resource.
skip a chapter.
All right, so let's go, I want to skip housing too.
I always
Because,
wanted to.
because we're still waiting for the Affordable Housing Working Group to report out.
Yes.
So, let's take a look at
In front of me.
transportation, public facilities, and recreation and community services. And it turns out that those are items that are going to appear in the next anchor.
So
So
Alan,
read the anchor to know what to think.
so I have a suggestion. Ask us to prepare to discuss 4.
Yeah.
And if we stop at 3, that's all the time we have for, that's great. But if we bang out the 3, then we have another one we can do.
Okay, recreation, transportation, public facilities, and fiscal capacity.
Perfect.
Okay.
Like your enthusiasm, Peter.
Okay, so, transportation, public facilities, recreation,
Barn
fiscal
door.
capacity, for the
Barn
next
door.
meeting. And then I'll take a look at what's left and we'll sort it from there. In the meantime, we'll work on the inventory chapters. We need to wrap this up by November. I keep saying November, I don't know why I'm sticking in November, maybe it's Thanksgiving, I don't know. But we have to close this off at some point in time to bring it out to the community and have the select board review it and then bring it out to the town in March. Now, speaking of which, outreach. We received some criticism about the fact that even though we did outreach in a lot of different ways, we maybe did not do enough. So that's why we started with, let's do these anchor articles where we break this 200-plus page thing and break it up into smaller bits, and that's underway.
Where does the criticism come from?
Some of the meetings that we had during the last several community meetings we had, I think there was, and there was a recommendation actually by George at one of the meetings that we had upstairs several months ago, that he said, it would really help if we had took this thing and had bite-sized pieces of the thing instead of the whole enchilada that everybody was looking at. So I took that to heart, and that's why we're doing these anchor articles. I've also prepared a small update that's going to go in with the tax notices. It's going to be an insert into the tax notices that are going to be sent out, I think, in August or something. So that's going to get out to the
Oh,
town.
that's great.
But then there's the whole thing about personal contact. I'm going to talk to my road association at the end of the week. If you folks have a road association or any kind of meeting that you think would be useful to get inputs, comments from folks, please do that. We have to exploit anything that we have right now, any means that we have right now to try to get as much as we possibly can. But ultimately, I think we have to focus on completing the task and then having the community look at it and then getting sort of like the meeting that we had several months ago where we got everybody together. There probably was 100 people there, at least more, maybe, at the school, and say, okay, what do you guys think? And that's kind of the last wicket that I see that we have to go through before we get it to the town formally. So, following the recommendations here, we'll break this up into topics over the next several meetings that we have here. Take a look at each one to make sure that we're satisfied, that it addresses what they need to address. If there's a shortfall, we'll try to figure out how to solve that. We'll work on the inventory chapter updates. But also, please keep in mind outreach in any form or fashion that you guys and gals can do, that would be great.
Al,
So, ma'am.
talking about outreach. We're trying really hard to have outreach for this program on September 11th. And it's our way to help the comp plan answer some of the questions that have been coming up. We're hoping to get something in the September anchor, because it'll come out on the 1st and program's 2 weeks later. I'm trying to think of other ways, and we have the town electronic system. We're putting something in the bulletin. I'm trying to think if anybody has some suggestions how to reach out even further.
Well, Facebook.
Well, that'll be part of it.
So one of the things that's worked in the past, I think, is people who are involved in organizations here in town, might be one, or others, to pass on the information to whatever organizations they're part of. And the other thing with Facebook is the town can put it on its Facebook page, and then then reach out to people who have popular Facebook pages in town to try to make sure they repost it.
Mr. Gilly, can you help us?
I'm not, George would be the better one if he was here. He's got a bigger following than I do on
Okay.
Facebook.
Well, you gotta talk to him ahead of time.
Yeah, I can talk to him. Him and Nefsa have quite a big following
Yeah.
in town, and I'm sure if I share it, I can get them to
I
share
mean,
it.
I have no sharing ability on Facebook, because I don't.
I don't think any
You're
of
talking
you-
about this meeting, specifically the meeting on the 11th.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, and to direct this, I mean, we're gonna get the,
Is it on Harpswell TV, the scroll that?
we can do that, because Ms. Wendy is working on the introduction for this program. That is going to be, the idea is we get this done by next Monday, that it will be going into a poster of some sort and can be used as a handout. But we have to figure out a way to get the attention and have it be, Had to
I
make
suspect
the
you may
link
have
of
more
what the
people in here
questions
than
have
you
been. I'm
could
sorry?
ever. I suspect you'll probably have more people in here than the capacity of the room. That's my guess.
it's a possibility, but I didn't go for the school right off the bat.
Okay, do we have a plan? Does everybody feel like we have, yes?
Well, I think the elephant in the room is off in the corner, we're not paying attention to it. The elephant in the room still remains housing and working waterfront. I think we're dealing with an awful lot of really important stuff, but it's secondary to those
Yeah,
two.
the reason, when I was thinking about these anchor articles, I was thinking about dealing with those elephants, if you will, in the room at the tail end, because that would give us time to get feedback from the Affordable Housing Working Group and for us to kind of think about it a little bit longer. So I think those topics are going to be the penultimate act of group. Okay.
I'm just hoping that
We're not gonna forget
every
it.
meeting we have, we'll spend some time on them in a focused way. We don't push them aside.
So next
for
meeting,
these
we're not going to talk
secondary
about housing or future land use. We're going to talk about the 4 topics, 3 at least, 4 topics that we broke out: transportation, public facilities, recreation, and physical capacity. And make sure that everybody feels like we've looked at those areas thoroughly, and feel satisfied that we can put those, as you say, on the shelf for now until we handle the other topics that are coming up.
Could you or somebody, this draft, which is the most recent one, it just got printed out this morning, thanks to Kyle.
Yeah.
The statements in here on the land use actually go back to before we sort of felt like we got slapped in the face and we had to make a major revision. That's right, this.
Talking about districts and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the issue that bothered a lot of people, and the issue, that's, I think we're moving toward a situation where being less specific about those particular things and looking at the entire interior zone as potential development, the potential development area where you can have a variety of different things. That's the direction that we're going to.
So-
Now,
so
my
this draft
understanding
hasn't
is
been
that-
Altered since view
It
sheds.
hasn't been altered because that's Viewshed's website on
Right.
our website. And they're making, this is what my understanding is, there are not updates being made because they're not working for us right now.
Yeah.
Right. And that was our choice.
That was our
Yeah,
choice,
good
yeah.
one.
Because there's some information about meetings that I wanted taken down because they're past. And that's when I found out that it's managed by them.
Okay, it's warm in here.
Well, Mary Ann, go back.
Yeah.
If you give me a list of what you think that is on the website that needs to be removed, and
Oh, our
we'll-
meeting, yeah, okay. I
we'll
can
get
do
it
that.
removed.
Okay, because the meetings are like in March and April.
Right.
And
Right.
it's old information.
Old stuff should be stripped off,
I'll
and
do
Judy
that.
will do that.
Doesn't take
Okay,
long.
all right. Anything else? Have we beat this horse to death tonight? Again, I want to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart for hanging in there for this process. It's been a long haul, and I know everybody's anxious to bring it to a conclusion. And again, just thank you very much.